Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you for joining us on a Saturday. Today, we are going to talk about how you should, the tips and tricks for you to, take your CFA exam. Facing the first challenge of your CFA journey can be quite overwhelming, right? But remember, you're not alone because we are here to guide you on what you should do in your presentation and also to clear your CFA exams. Well, today we are so glad to have Darren back. Darren Degraaf is currently an independent contractor for several international finance training companies. In terms of international lecturing experience, Darren, he has taught in Europe, the Middle East, the Americas, and throughout the Asia over the past 12 years. Well, he covered majority of the topics, at all three levels of CFA program. So let's not uh, hold on too long. Let's get Darren's up to the screen. Welcome, Darren.
Thank you, Michelle. Very kind introduction. So welcome. I'm based in Vancouver and have been for all my life. But I've done a lot of training, specifically at Sunway College over in Malaysia. So I just want to say hi to everyone. My understanding is that most of you are level 1 candidates, and we have some level 2. So I'll try and speak to both. And Beng Hooi, my colleague, who I've been spending way too much time with over maybe the last 15 years now, he will come in after myself, and then we'll have a nice little Q&A. Where you can ask both of us questions. Now, both Beng Hooi and myself were CFA charter holders, so both of us will have a lot of some advice and some tips, as they say, tricks and techniques to help you through the exam. There's no secret. The pass rates are absolutely intimidating in the low 20% for the last few sessions. The very last one came up a little bit at about 33%, I think it was, but nevertheless, we're here today to kind of maybe help with you in that regard. So I'm going to share my screen here, and I have a couple of power or PDFs now. Just give me a moment. I'm going to pan over to the first one. Okay, so both at levels 1 and 2, you folks know that there are 10 major topic areas. Now, I'm going to talk in terms of tips and tricks. I'm going to talk a little bit about weightage, and I'm also going to talk about overlap, especially with the fundamental, i.e. like the core concepts. Now, at level 1, there are about 570, I think, what are called learning outcome statements. So basically, in college or uni, we would call those like concept checkers. So there's almost 600. So there's way too many. There are, as you know, about 180 questions on the exam at level 1 and 90 at level 2. So there just isn't a snowball's chance in hell that they're going to examine everything. So, but you can't game this exam, just to be clear. But there are some tips that we can share with you. So really quickly, first we got their ethics. Ethics has now been moved to the end of the curriculum. It used to be the first study sessions for so many years, but now it's near the end. Not because it's least important. Presumably, it's because it is a heavy weightage topic, and they do want you to be fresh. The material should be fresh in your mind on game day. So ethics is at level 1 can be anywhere between 15 and 20%, and we do have a weightage slide coming up in a moment. And I do want to let you know that Michelle will be providing this presentation as well as Beng Hoi's after the show. So ethics is 15 to 20. Again, you don't need to write that down. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy. And in terms of another point is that ethics is also a heavy weightage at levels 2, and if I can add, level 3 as well. The concepts are the same. The tip I would share with ethics is that level 1, it's a little bit more straightforward. I mean, relatively speaking, these questions are hard, but at levels 2 and 3, they tend to move towards not just challenging you on your understanding of the required code and standards, but the recommended. So the questions at levels 2 and 3 can be much trickier, even though the content is the same. So level 1, you really want to focus more on the requirements as opposed to the recommended procedures. I mean, you still need to know them because they could very well come up, but you're just more likely to see them at the later levels. Okay, now in terms of econ, econ's kind of a tricky one. It's a fascinating topic. I want to be clear about that. But it has given students a heartburn since, as I like to say, before Jesus was a cowboy. Okay. I remember when I completed my level 3 exam, I turned to the fellow next to me And he looked at me and he was like, what was that? Like he had an advanced degree in econometrics, and he's like I've never seen questions like that before, like from the econ section. Bossett, who wrote the study guides for Wiley, in his level 2 video, shares a story about how when he wrote the econ section at level 2, he was about 45 minutes deep, which is way too long for a low weightage topic, and then he was scrambling for time. Econ, again, is interesting, but what's challenging is that while it is a good idea, I'm not saying you don't try and relate what is in the CFA program to real life, especially like you talk about stagflation, right? So right now we've got energy policy that's going one way, at least stateside and in Canada. We got energy policy, I guess because of the war and whatnot, going one way, and then we've got quantitative tightening, right? So a lot of students might, oh my gosh, like stagflation is so interesting. Let's talk about it. That's good. It's good to be passionate, right? You got to be energetic, right? You got to play the long game, right? As Beng Hooi likes to say, you got to be engaged, right? You got to enjoy and embrace the CFA lifestyle. So I'm not saying you don't go crazy on econ, but you want to kind of temper that with a little bit of wisdom. Again, it's low weightage. Where you want to spend your time and energy and effort, and this is also at level 2 as well. So you level 2 folks listen in, is that you want to make sure that you can distinguish between like the Austrian school of thought, the neoclassical school of thought, the monetarists, right? All the different thoughts out there. You need to understand if the Fed tightens or eases, theoretically, what do the monetarists believe? Well, they believe inflation's going to go up in the short run and the long run, right? But what do central banks around the world? Well, most of them anyway seem to think, go ahead and print the money. It's going to increase real GDP in the short run. Okay, is that true? I don't know. We could sit here all day and we could argue about it, right? But in terms of tips and tricks on passing the exam, stay focused. What does the LOS say? It means that you need to describe and distinguish between those schools of thought. Now, one tip I want to share with you, and you might want to write this down because it's not listed anywhere else, is that if the fact pattern, as it were, is silent. So again, if the question in level 2, if the vignette, the case, if the fact pattern is silent, assume that the author, the CFA author, is asking about the short run impact. Okay? All right. And econ is low weightage right all the way through. Okay, so it's a low hitter at level 1, level 2, and level 3. So if you're going to say, you know what, I'm going to go crazy on ethics and I'm going to go really hard on accounting and equities and fixed income, not a bad strategy, right? Allocate the appropriate amount of time to econ because it doesn't get any more important at the later levels. Now, corporate issuers, they used to call that corporate finance. I don't know, I prefer corporate finance, or you could call it financial management. At levels 1 and 2, the big hitters are cost of capital and capital budgeting. Okay, at level 2, they just expand it so that you learn a bunch of other models like economic profit, and anyway, they extend things a little bit further. But in the end, at level 2, they basically tell you that it doesn't matter whether you use economic profit or residual income type models and things like that, that your NPV theoretically, as long as your variables are internally consistent, are going to be the same, right? So corporate finance, corporate issuers, I should say, relatively speaking, it's quite an interesting topic. And I think it's kind of like using the old finance expression, it's kind of low hanging fruit. I think you're going to find a lot of easy marks there. So don't spend too much time in corporate issuers. Take the easy points, move on. If you can calculate NPV and IRR and things like that, if you can understand the pros and cons of IRR versus NPV versus payback versus discounted payback, right, versus profitability index. Again, you need to know how to calculate all those models, and you need to know what their pros and cons are. Okay, so that's a big takeaway. Cost of capital, really the big thing to note is WACC. So sometimes they'll say, well, here's a good example Peter Lidto likes to say is, it's an old one, but from March of 2003, you got a company like Hooters, right? I don't even know if they still have one in Asia, but anyway, they were in the fast food industry, and then in March of 2003, they decided, hey, let's get into the airline industry. So now you got to be thinking, okay, what about my beta? So you're looking at a defensive play, right? Fast food, defensive stock. And you look at airlines, which is cyclical, beta greater than 1. So the core business has a beta less than 1, defensive, steady Eddie. Airline, very risky, right? 2008 financial crisis, a lot of bankruptcies, a lot of consolidations. COVID, well, we know what happened there, right? So cyclical stocks, they got more volatility. So they'll ask you questions in that area about like, whether or not, the project beta right, which is maybe starting an airline, would the project beta be different than the company's average or core beta, which is we usually call WACC? And then they get into things like should you use market value weights or book value weights and things like that. So it's really not too bad. A couple trivial points, but on the whole, pretty good reading, interesting and not too challenging conceptually. Now, quantitative methods is interesting. They introduced a level 2 reading into level 1, which is regression. Now, they only have simple regression where you only have one X and one Y. And at level 2, they go into multiple regression. So you have multiple independent variables trying to explain an output. So as an example, at level 1, you might just have, you might be talking more about correlation. Like what's the correlation between X and Y? Whereas at level 2, you might be looking at, let's say, a probability of default model. Well, what variables would be related and would kind of predict within a certain accuracy the probability of default of a borrower, right? So you might look at things like how many times has the customer gone into overdraft, how many times or what the checking account balance, is it going up or is it going down? If you could do things like postal code and credit score, well, then those would also be good predictors of default as well, presumably. So that's really, I think, the big difference between level 1 and level 2 is that level 2 quant, we get into multiple regression instead of single regression. And then there's also a really crazy time series reading at level 2, which is not for the faint of heart. It's very technical, and you're going to need to put a lot of time and energy and effort into that. Now, financial statement analysis level 1 is really a review of an intro to accounting course that many of you probably took at college and uni. You want to make sure that you understand the differences in depreciation, inventory valuation. And so on game day, they could ask you a question. Let's say Beng Hooi Incorporated decided to switch from straight line to accelerated. What would that do to your NPV? Right? So it ties in accounting, understanding accounting principles with things like time value of money, right? All the way into corporate issuers, NPV. So lots of overlap there. Now, at level 2, the trick with FRA is make sure that you can understand translation, consolidation, and pension accounting like an absolute freaking ninja. Because if you don't, you will get violated. Okay, I kid you not. It will not be pretty. They will expose your weakness and they will destroy you in that area. So again, in level 2 FRA, you need to make sure you're good at, and not just good, you have to be in borderline CPA, right? Or what is that? I guess using the UK, ICAW or ACCA. You have to be like an absolute Viking in consolidation, translation, and pension accounting. Now, the financial statement analysis techniques readings at level 1 and 2 are very interesting. That's where accounting meets equities, right? Very, very interesting stuff where you're analyzing a company's strategy, and that tees it up nicely for the next topic, which is equity. Accounting is worth a lot. It's like 13 to 17 at level 1, and even at level 2, we'll see it on the next slide. It's also a heavy weighter. It drops a little bit in weightage, but it's still heavy. So accounting at level 1 and 2, you'll be glad that you put the time and energy. Very important historically. Okay, and Beng Hooi can probably speak to this as well. Historically, we've seen students who do well in accounting. They also do well in corporate issuers, as well as equity investments, as well as fixed income. Because the CFA program was the brainchild of Benjamin Graham, okay, and it's fundamental analysis, folks. You're only going to find one reading in the entire CFA program on technical. That's at level 1 in quant. Forget about it, okay? It's fundamental analysis, taking accounting data or econ data. But normally in the CFA program, it's taking accounting data and valuing stocks, valuing bonds, and level 2 in alternatives, valuing real estate. So you want to be good. You want to be an expert, borderline ACCA, CIMA, you name it. You want to be a very, very strong in accounting so that not only can you clear level 1, because you'll probably do well, again, in corporate finance, equity, and fixed income, which are all high weightage. It'll also, as they say, forgive the expression, pay dividends down the line at level 2, because all those topics are also high weightage at level 2. Now, equity investments, as you can imagine, main reading is valuing stocks. Now, at level 1, how it distinguishes it from level 2 is at level 1, you just use the dividend discount model. Okay, at level 2, we learn other models like residual income, free cash flow to the firm, free cash flow to equity, and a few others. Okay, so that's really the main difference. Most of level 2 is about valuation. At level 1, there are some introductory readings like what is a stock, common stock, preferred stock. That's all basic stuff, and you should just absolutely destroy that. I don't find most students don't find equity to be all that difficult, but it is high weightage, so you should be able to pick up a lot of points here. Fixed income is also a lot like equity. You're going to spend a lot of time valuing bonds. You're going to value bonds using yield to maturity. You're going to value bonds using, they'll give you a yield curve, so you use spot rates. They introduce the notion of arbitrage, if there's a difference between spot rates and yield to maturity. But at level 1, the fixed income is not too difficult. Level 2 fixed income gets really challenging because then you actually have to value callable and puttable and convertible bonds using what they call an interest rate lattice, like use a backward induction using I think it's a binomial interest rate tree. It's very, very, very technical, almost as technical, I think, as the time series reading in quant that I referred to earlier. So fixed income at level 2 is a lot harder. But again, if you take the time and energy and effort to master doing the backward induction, it'll also probably help you in mastering concepts such as the option adjusted spread, the difference between the option adjusted spread and the Z spread, and things like that. And also fixed income also ties into derivatives, because as I just talked about, when you're valuing callable and puttable bonds, there's overlap there because obviously those are options. So speaking of derivatives, low weightage, like econ, level 1 derivatives is relatively easy, mostly definitional. What's the difference between a future and a forward? So a future has, because it's exchange traded, it doesn't have the counterparty credit risk. It doesn't have the liquidity risk that forwards do. And then they get into swaps, which are really just a series of forwards. They're pretty much the same thing. They're also OTC, so they carry those risks that I just described. Level 2 derivatives is an absolute gong show. You have to know how to value, both value and price, option swaps, forwards, like everything. Like it's very, very difficult. Not only do you need to know how to value them and price them, you need to be able to value them at initiation, at expiration, as well as along the way, like 90 days in, 180 days in, that kind of thing. Alternative investments, level 1 is a cakewalk. It's all definitional. Their only difficult thing in alternative investments is to calculate the returns on hedge funds, which is incredibly difficult because they introduce things like a high watermark, a soft or a hard hurdle, and things like that. So it can get really, really, really tricky. But other than that, it's an absolute cakewalk because they basically just ask you, what's the difference between buying a piece of real estate, like the actual land, and a REIT? Or what's the difference between a mortgage on a property and the mortgage itself? They introduced a few other things like new asset classes in alternatives, such as infrastructure, right? Those kinds of things. But most of the private equity and the fund stuff, private equity, hedge fund, leverage buyout, pretty much all definitional. Now, alternatives at level 2 is valuation. You value real estate, right? Using a DCF model and other types of model, things like that. And then finally, portfolio management. And the one thing about weightage about alternatives, it's also very low all the way through the program. So econ's low, derivatives is low, alternatives is low. But again, alternatives is really easy. So even though it's low weightage, go for those easy points. Now, portfolio management at level 1 is mostly like CAPM, CML, SML, beta. So there's overlap again with valuation. So they might give you an SML and they show you a stock that's sitting above the SML, and you have to be able to tell the CFA author on exam day whether it's undervalued or overvalued. And also things like what's the difference between the CML and the SML. So CML is mostly looking at efficiency, whereas SML is looking at pricing. And if you can keep that lined up, keep your poop in a group, as I like to say, you'll be in pretty good shape. Okay, so I talked about the weightages. There they are again. Sorry, Michelle's going to provide this a little bit later on. Again, ignore level 3, but again, just a real quick recap. Look at ethics. It's the big hitter. You got to be good at it. Accounting, 4 bullets down. That's a big one. Again, corporate issuers, also kind of, is pretty heavy. Level 2, less so. But again, with the overlap with accounting, I think that's really going to help you. Look at equity and fixed income, strong, strong, strong all the way through. So you got to be good at valuing stocks and bonds, is particularly at levels 1 and 2. And again, looking at derivatives and alternatives, not too much there. But again, alternatives being relatively easy. Now, one thing I wanted to show you really quickly before I pass it over to my colleague is in our classes, what we do is we use questions. And I'm just going to show you a couple here where we show you how to use your Texas Instruments TI BA2 Plus to calculate things like, the increase in the liability on a fixed income security, right? Now, using this shortcut, as it were, it's the second function, amortization function. So we show you how to use that. Another question is if you want to value a bond, look at this sucker here. If you want to value a bond in between interest coupon dates, it's incredibly technical. This part here on the left is just terrible. It's the old-fashioned way, as it were. You actually have to calculate the number of days between the last coupon and the settlement date, and it can get very, very challenging. Now on the right here is the way that you would do it using your calculator. Now, if you see it there, there's a lot of work, right? But with a little bit of practice, you can save a little bit of time. So again, I'm just trying to show you some of the shortcuts and tips and tricks that we would show you, in our course, right? So again, how do you value a bond? The flat price. In other words, what is the clean price or the flat price as opposed to the dirty price or the full price? Lots of more slides here, folks, but we wanted to keep this one nice and tight. I think I'm actually already over time, so I'm going to pass it to the Sifu himself, Beng Hooi. Here we go.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Darren, for the wonderful sharing on the tips and tricks. If the audience here have any questions for Darren, please type them into your chat box. We will circle back to the questions towards the end. So I'm just going to spend about 15 minutes giving an overview of the CFA program and the classes that we're running. So I'm just going to run through my deck here and also share some tips along the way as well. But do type in your questions in to the chat box. Okay. So my next slide is I just want to introduce our company. We have been in partnership with Sunway Tests for more than a decade, and of course at the same time also with WEIGHTAGE, that is our global content partner. So if you can move to the next slide, Michelle, I need your help. The next one here. Okay. So a bit of introduction about AB Maximus. We've been running CFA prep programs for a very long time, 25 years this year. And it's a very specialized company supporting the securities and capital markets industry, mostly around Southeast Asia. So that would be in Singapore, Malaysia, Brunei, Vietnam, Indonesia. And we also support the financial regulator in 3 countries, Singapore, Malaysia, and Brunei, in terms of developing their curriculum for licensing examinations, etc. Yeah, that's what we do. On the next slide now, it's a general information about the CFA program. I'm going to run through it quickly just to highlight a few things. So these are the steps needed to become a charter holder. That is passing the exam, getting the experience. When it comes to the experience part, you may actually accumulate the experience before being a candidate, or during your candidacy, or even after. So, it's very, very flexible in terms of the experience accumulation. And in fact, even in terms of the examination, you can actually theoretically take a break in between the CFA levels. But our recommendation is, try to, keep that momentum going, because obviously those in level 2 in the audience here would know that there is a lot of preparation needed. So you need to get that momentum going. Now, when it comes to membership, in order to become a CFA charter holder, you need to join CFA Institute as a member, and membership at your local CFA chapter is optional, but it's highly encouraged. Why is that so? Because we think that having that network within where within the city where you work is very helpful in terms of getting opportunities, jobs, etc., etc. Yeah. So okay, so that's a quick one on how to become a charter holder. So on the next slide, work experience requirement. So what you see, point number one here is fairly new because prior to this criteria, it was 48 months, right? Now CFA Institute has made it more definitive. It's 4,000 hours of experience, and at least you need 36 months to complete this 4,000 hours. So previously is at least 50% of the time working in an investment decision-making related job, and 48 months. So this is really very good. Makes it more quantitative. Yes. So on the next slide is about the curriculum updates. So last year, 2021, was the first time ever that there was no change in curriculum. So for 2022 now, it's kind of like catching up. So you look at the percentage of readings that's updated and added, it's actually very hefty at level 1. So in a normal year-to-year change, you will not see these kind of numbers. Okay, it's just like catching up 2 years of changes into one. So here is the point that every year the CFA curriculum is being updated. So therefore, the readings, the questions, and so on will actually be updated. So it's very, very important that everyone, all the candidates, use the latest material. So for us, the program that we run from day one, we had always been using the latest material, and it's the original material. And we work with Wiley for the content, right? So a bit more about that in a while. Okay, so that's level 1 overview of the change. So on the next slide, and some of this information, you can get it from the CFA Institute website. So I just want to highlight the changes here. So you can see that some readings are removed. Okay, so what are these readings, right? So for the level 1 folks here, now the entire level 1 or level 2 or level 3 curriculum is divided into study sessions. And these study sessions will typically cover one topic, or it might take like maybe 2 or 3 study sessions to cover one topic or subject. And within each study session, then you have readings. So these readings are, for example, they could be like a chapter from, or a couple of chapters from a certain book or curriculum that is produced by the CFA Institute. So the readings are like chapters from the textbook. Okay, so this is the one that shows what is removed. On the next slide, it shows what's being added. So the point I want to just chip in here is, please pay attention not just to those chapters that are removed, meaning that, okay, it's not going to be tested. Also pay attention to the chapters or the topics that are being added to the curriculum. All right. I mean, if I were the examiner, of course, I would introduce new questions right into the question pool. Yeah. So it's important to pay attention to the changes in curriculum. The next 3 slides, I think we can just flip it through very quickly. That's for level 2, and you can also check it out, right? The changes, what's added, what is removed. Okay, so on the next slide, Darren mentioned this just a while ago. Yeah, so these are the numbers, right? So last year, the numbers for level 1 and 2 really crashed. No surprises really, because it's really a lot about the state of preparedness of the candidates. I mean, everyone was still struggling with the pandemic even last year. So, and there's a lot of anxiety over, is the lockdown going to be lifted, etc., etc. So that anxiety and lack of preparation, translates into the low pass rates. But I would say, I mean, at the end of the day, for candidates who are well prepared, um, you will not be one of the statistics here. Okay, actually, the numbers kind of rebounded quite a bit early this year. So on the next slide, you see the February numbers. Level 1 has kind of come up a little bit from the low, and level 2 is kind of recovered back to the mid 40s. Now, on the slide, you can also see like a no-show rate. And this is mostly at level 1. Even level 2, there are some people who don't show up. And the no-show rate can be something like 20-25%. So imagine this, right? That 100 people, say, in level 1 signs up, and 75 will show up, and 1/3 of them will make it to level 2, right? So in other words, the effective passing rate at level 1 is about 1/4, right? Obviously, it gets better at level 2, something like 40% effective pass rate, and level 3 probably 50 to 60. So the thing is, now you see, wow, it's just so difficult. For the level 1 folks, you might be turned off by the numbers. Don't, because there are so many people taking the examinations, and sometimes many of these candidates are not well prepared. So like I mentioned earlier, preparation is really, really the key. Okay. Now on the next slide, this is something that Darren mentioned, and for each of the subjects, there is a range of weightage, and this is what is published by CFA Institute. So they would stick with this, definitely stick with this, and this is to help candidates in their preparation as you're preparing for the exam. You look at what is more important, what is not so important. But touch wood, right? If you are well prepared, whether it's a big subject or a small subject, you want to focus on it anyway, because the point here is certainly at level 1, we do not encourage people to spot questions because there are just so many questions, so many subjects. So try your best, try to cover everything. But of course, when it comes to the crunch time, that last 1 week of preparation before the exam, you should spend, depending on your strategy, right? If you are equally competent in all the topics, obviously you spend more time with the topics that are more important. But some other strategy will say that you might want to spend more time in the subjects that you need to really brush up, and your weaker subjects spend more time. So depending on strategy. So that's why, coming for a study program, a program like ours, or forming study groups, working with like-minded fellow candidates will help you sharpen your exam strategy, right? Okay, that's the exam weightage. Okay, so just a bit on the dates. If you're wondering, if you have not yet registered, it might still be in time for the November exam. So on the next slide, you'll see the deadlines for signing up. One more. Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Before we talk about the exam registration. Okay. So on exam day, which is in the window of a week, right? You choose one of the dates you can make it. It's one of the day within that week. And on that same day, there are 2 sessions, the morning session, afternoon session. And within the morning session, session 1, okay, so you see the topics that will be tested. And then the afternoon session, the other topics. So here is where it is a bit different from the previous pre-COVID format, because pre-COVID, when you go into the exam hall for level 1, and then the same 10 topics appear again in level 2, in the afternoon session, right? Of course, it's different questions, but the same topic appears again. But now, with the computer-based testing, whatever that is in the morning session will not be tested again in the afternoon session. Okay, yeah, so hopefully that's helpful. So yeah, even there is a strategy around, exam format as well. Okay, on the next slide. Okay, so this one is a bit of detail, fine print you can see there, but it's 180 multiple choice questions for level 1, fewer questions for level 2. For those who have not taken the exam before, level 1, you have like standalone questions really. So whereas at level 2, they appear as a set of related questions to a mini case study. Okay, so level 1, level 2 structure. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so that's what it's here. It's called vignettes, but really it is like a set of questions, and they are still multiple choice in level 2, but they are related to a case. Okay, so that's the structure for you. On the next slide, the examination window. So at level 1 is four times a year. Level 2 now is 3 times a year, since about a year ago. Okay, yeah. So that's 2022. In 2023, you see that the same, right? 4 times, 3 times, but except the dates are slightly different. So in terms of the examination prep that we are running, we prepare candidates in 2 semesters. So first half of the year is mainly to prepare candidates for the May exam or even the August exam, right? So classes typically will run from July until early parts of November. And likewise, in the first semester, it starts in January and it ends sometime in early May, right? So whether it's level 1 or level 2, that is approximately the kind of time frame, approximately plus minus a couple of weeks. Yeah, so that's the date for 2023 here. On the next slide, just wrapping up a little bit. So this is the fees here. So now you're in a $1,000 fee. So there's a one-time registration, and then there is a one-time enrollment fee, lifetime enrollment fee one time, and then every exam that you sit for, there is a registration fee depending on when you sign up. Yeah, for the different levels, it's the same fee, right? Level 1 and 2 is the same fee. Okay, now next slide. This is the one for next year's enrollment. Is already open. Okay. Okay, next slide. Now the Sunway prep that we have here, this is the fee schedule. So if you're an alumni of Sunway Tests, or if your company is a corporate client of Sunway Tests, or if you're a World Prize winner or Malaysian Prize winner for for the accounting programs, you do get very nice discounts here. Okay, so that's on the fees. On the next slide, you can see that we've got 2 intakes, like I mentioned earlier, and then a bit more description for program on the next slide. Yeah. So on the next slide, please. Yes. So, okay. So what we have here is we have regular classes at the beginning, the regular classes, weekly classes, and towards the end of the program, before the real exams, we run a mock exam. Plus, we also run a revision class. Primarily, we have Darren Degraaf as the lead instructor for the revision class. Plus, we have a local instructor joining in as well. So what is unique about our program is we do not just depend on one instructor or two instructors. We have at least 4 to 5 instructors delivering that program per level. Why is that? Because we believe in having subject matter experts, and who are experienced in running CFA prep classes to deliver the program, right? Because myself, for example, although I'm not teaching the class anymore, but example, I'm an equity expert, so that's where my experience is. So therefore, I would teach. Previously, I would teach the topics related to equities, time value, and ethics as well, etc., etc. Okay, but in the case of Darren, Darren does it full time, right? So we get Darren to come and deliver the revision class to tie everything together. Yeah, so that's very important. And of course, everything is bundled with the Wiley study guide books and the Wiley portal. You get an account. That package alone is worth about $1,000, right? And that is all available for our class students. And of course, you can see on the screen here, there's a Wiley partner until you pass guarantee that, touch wood, if you do not pass at that level, you get to attend the classes again the next round free of charge, right? You get to access the Wiley portal and the content the next round at the same level free of charge. Okay, so that is what we have for our program. On the next slide, a bit more detail about what's included in the Wiley package. So, of course, we run the live classes via Zoom. In case you miss any of the classes, you can go onto the Wiley portal. It's on-demand videos available. And of course, Darren is also teaching. And all that is actually available via the recorded lectures. And of course, there are a lot of tools available within the portal, thousands of practice questions. There's a dashboard, formula sheets, more mock exams. It is all that you need to prepare for the CFA exams. For most folks, actually, it's more than what you need. Okay, on the next slide, and this is the time table for our classes. Here you can see that we start for level 1, 9th July. So that's like very, very soon, guys. Very, very soon. So if you're going to attend classes, yeah, this is the program to sign up for, right? For level 2, we have that the dates on the next slide. In level 2, starting a little bit later the following week, mid-July, same thing, right? You got your regular classes, then we have the online revision, mock exam, CFA exam. Okay, all in preparation for the November CFA exam. Okay, so wrapping up my slides here before we open the floor for Q&A. And of course, I hope that everyone is kind of like paying attention to the chat, because as I was speaking, Michelle and Darren, they were adding more, tips onto the chat. So a lot of good tips for you guys. Okay, so is there really like a secret sauce, in passing the exam? Like I mentioned, right, it's about preparation and how do you really make effective use of your time and your effort to make it count for the exam day. Really, it's preparation. So before coming for classes, we highly recommend that you do some reading before you come. Check out the study guide or check out the CFA Institute textbook, which if you are a CFA exam registered candidate, CFAI will actually provide you with an online access to the CFA text. Okay, so when you come for classes, obviously, take full advantage of that. Ask questions during classes. If you miss asking questions during that time. We do have a closed WhatsApp group for the current candidates. So there we can, you can post your questions. We sometimes send reminders about, oh, guys, there's an upcoming class. When is it? And here's the access and so on, right? So that is very important to keep it up, keep the momentum going. If you, unfortunately, I mean, sometimes you are busy with your work, you miss a class, no worries. Catch up quickly, watch the video within 1 to 2 days. Don't wait for the next week, all right? Because every week there's something new that you want to, quickly pick up, master that content, try the questions, and then move on the next week, and then you repeat the same steps again. It's really like running a marathon, guys. Okay, yeah, the momentum must be there. Okay, so when it comes to revision, then that's when we drill more. We help, with Darren's help, of course. We hope that by that time, revision time, by the time you complete the revision, rather, you will be all prepared for the exams. Okay, now next slide. Okay, this is the contact information. Just in case this morning, if you're not able to ask your questions, or if we are not able to answer your questions, please drop Michelle an email for inquiries about the program that we're running. If you have general questions, you can drop an email to my colleague, Andrew Jong. Both Michelle and Andrew are happy to, be of help to all of you. And of course, with this, I'd like to invite Darren back to the studio. And, let's take some of your questions, guys. Yeah. So we'll spend about 15 minutes. Yeah, so we will kind of like go until 11:05. Yeah, if that's fine with you guys. Okay, so just now as Darren was speaking, I kind of like jotted down a few points. Yeah, even though we've been doing this for like 2 decades, Darren, but
Yep.
still there's always something to remind the audience about. That is the calculator. We all know that there are 2 approved models of calculator, right? So Darren mentioned one of them, that is the Texas Instrument BA2 Plus, right? That is one of the models. It is not the Texas whatever, but it is a Texas Instrument BA2 Plus. Yes, that is very, very specific. And the other model, you can see on the chat here, is the HP12C, not the 17, not the 19, but the 12C, right? And nothing else. No Casio, no Seiko, whatever. Very specific. So we recommend the Texas Instrument BA2 Plus, right? For a couple of reasons. It's not because we are lazy to like prepare 2 sets of slides. We do have that. But between the 2 calculators, the Texas Instrument is, number one, is much easier to use. It's very similar to many of the other Japanese calculators like the Casio Cashflow 100 or something like that. FC100, yeah, something similar to Japanese models. And it has an equal button, guys, because the HP12C does not have an equal button. So it's a very old model, but they still use it, unfortunately. So we recommend Texas Instrument, much easier to use, and it's more widely available anyway in most countries, and it's cheaper, actually. Yeah, a bit plasticky though. So if you don't mind spending a bit more, there is a platinum version of the BA2 Plus. That's actually easier to use, but the student model is okay as well. A bit plasticky, but it's okay, right? So that's on the calculator choice. Now, you might ask, hey, this is a financial, CFA exam. What if I lose my calculator that day, or my calculator gets spoiled, run out of batteries? Then it's too bad, guys. So therefore, make sure you replace your batteries before you go for exam. Make sure you bring it along. It's absolutely essential. Without the calculator, you will really, really struggle. We're not saying that there's going to be like, 100% of the questions are calculations. No. Darren, what do you think? Is it like 50%, 40% calculation?
Yeah, what we've been hearing over the last number of years was maybe like 3 out of 5, like more of a tilt towards conceptual type questions. So whether
Yeah.
whether it's 3 out of 5 or 3 out of 4, that might be a little bit high, but more conceptual. So like, and that's why like in the chat box I put like when you're doing your weekly classes or whatever, your weekly revision, you want to be doing the CFA end of chapter questions, because those they'll ask you to calculate, let's say, depreciation expense in year 3 or interest expense in year 2 and things like that. Whereas when you do the mock exams, like right from the institute, they'll ask you questions more like, well, let's say Beng Hooi decided again to change depreciation from straight line to accelerated. What is the impact on A, net income, B, ROA, or C, debt to equity? And students are like scrambling for the numbers. And if they haven't been doing enough mocks, they tend to kind of get a little bit anxious, right? So you need to do both. Like you need to do the CFA end of chapter questions so you understand the fact that under the accelerated model, of depreciation, you have higher depreciation in the early years, but you have lower depreciation in the later years. So that will help you in understanding the more conceptual questions. So you need to do the work. You need to roll up your sleeves on a weekly basis, but you need to be doing the right questions.
Okay, I don't really see any like burning questions coming from the audience here, but not to worry, guys. We we will have more opportunities. You can post your questions to us, to the emails and so on. But yeah, so Darren, so maybe for the level 2 folks in the audience here, do you have any additional tips on how to prepare for the set of 6 questions or 4 questions in the vignettes? Yeah.
Yeah, good question. So again, a vignette or whatever they want to call it, I think it's like a French word, but I don't know why they just don't say case or something. But
Yeah.
anyway, so as Beng Hooi alluded to, sometimes the case can be even a couple of pages. Even if you're doing like an equity valuation question, they might give you a balance sheet and an income statement on one page, a statement of cash flows, and then some notes on the second page, as it were. And then they'll have again anywhere between 4 to 6 questions that pertain to that case. And so the trick is that resist the temptation to start looking at those financials, like start looking at the question stems first. So by way of example, let's say it's an equity question. And so question 1 says, calculate the value of a stock using the dividend discount model, right? Second one, calculate the value of a stock using a free cash flow model, right? Question number 3, what is the conceptual difference between, let's say, free cash flow to equity and free cash flow to the firm, right? And then the fourth one could be maybe a multiplier and talking about the advantages and disadvantages of price to earnings versus price to book or price to cash flow. So you want to just kind of get a lay of the land. It's weird. Like there are only 90 questions, not 180. So you will have time, believe it or not. And but you'll probably find that you won't need 3 minutes to answer those questions. You could very well solve it in a minute and a half, just like at level 1. But the way it works, and here's the trick, is that not only do you want to read the questions first before you read the vignette, before you read the case, is you also want to make sure that you understand that the way the questions are listed is from top to down, like so from top down. So let's go to ethics for a moment. Normally there are 7 paragraphs in the ethics vignettes. The first paragraph is some kind of BS about let's say Beng Hooi and this fantastic equity valuation firm or model that he's come up with, and you just ignore all that stuff. Like it's just fluff, right? As a general rule. And it's the second paragraph where it begins. And usually, if let's say there are 6 questions on an ethics vignette, the first ethics question will pertain to that first paragraph. And you'll find that, test it out. When you do the CFA Institute mocks, you'll see that. Historically, it's always lined up. So again, if you don't do that, if you actually start and go crazy and read the entire ethics vignette, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have to read it again. and maybe even again, right? And you're going to get turned around because Beng Hooi is the president and CEO, and Ben is the analyst, and Barry is working with the Securities Exchange, and it just gets really crazy. So if you start reading, if you try and read the whole thing, you're just gonna have to read it again and maybe even again and again, and now you're gonna be behind on time, right? So don't do that. That's an amateur move. So I would say those are probably like the two major things. The major differences between level 1 and 2 is that really the major differences. The concepts are essentially the same. Level 1 has been described as an inch deep and a mile wide. Level 2 is much deeper. So that's why when I said in my part earlier that when you go through the time series reading, or like the pension reading, or the consolidation, or the translation reading, or the multiple regression, you have to know it inside and out, because there are much fewer LOSs at level 2, right? Concepts. There are much fewer at level 2, but what there are, you need to know in incredible detail, right? Same thing with like I said, with fixed income, with valuing callable, puttable, and convertible bonds. Same thing. You have there. If there's a weakness in your knowledge, they will expose it. Derivatives, again, at level 2, valuing, pricing, at expiration, at initiation, along the way, 30 days, 90 days in, kind of thing. There's no in between. You're either killing it or you're just going to get destroyed. So I find with level 2 is that some students get lucky. They come out of the exam and they're like, and you never want to do this on Twitter, of course, but to your buds, you might say, oh my gosh, we really got away with one. They didn't ask a question on pension accounting, right? But maybe on the next exam, they got 6 questions, 18 marks, boom. And if you don't get them right, you're coming back next year. And that's kind of level 2. Whereas level 1 is kind of like, there are twice as many questions. And yeah, they're not going to cover all 600 LOSs because there's only 180 questions, but it's a little bit slightly different strategy. So at level 1, don't try and master everything because you won't. Level 2, you actually do want to master pretty much everything. So that's probably my advice, Bing Hoi.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Darren. Yeah. So at level 2, um, yeah, it's half the number of questions, right? Um, okay, for the level 2 folks in the audience here, if you have already started preparing, you will realize that the level of difficulty just goes up a lot compared to level 1. So if you have passed the level 1 quite easily or comfortably, do not be complacent, right? For level 2, that is the killer level. For so many years and so many candidates that we have helped, supported, yeah, that is the feedback that we get. Level 2 is the killer level. So you must be like doubly prepared compared to level 1. Okay. So for level 1 folks in the audience here, if you have not yet decided on signing up for the exams, well, it's still not too late. You can still decide to sign up for the exams, although the fees have gone up a little bit more expensive. But trust us, the CFA program is still the program to go for if you want to have a career in the investment field. Now, for those who have already signed up as candidates and deciding on a study program, so we hope that you can sign up with us. Feel free to ask any questions about the timetable and so on. Michelle, could you also just put on the screen again so that the audience can see your email address, then they can follow up with you. Thank you so much. Yes. So contact Michelle if you have questions. And of course, this is a very good Saturday morning here in KL. And of course, Darren, this is a good evening for you in Vancouver on Friday night, Saturday morning. Yeah. Any last words, Darren, for the audience?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Beng Hoi mentioned. The CFA program, even though the pass rates have been low for a little while, play the long game. It is the gold standard The Economist has cited it so some time ago, mind you, but I still think it's as relevant today as it ever has been. The candidate body of knowledge is derived by industry experts. There's a longer explanation that Seafood sometimes gets into, but the long and the short of it is it's always adapting, always changing, and that's important for a number of reasons. Like the curriculum that you're studying from is basically a response to the question, what would you want your employees to know? The CF Institute basically asks the employers out there, the Goldman Sachs, AB, all the famous players out there, what would you want a recently minted CFA charter holder to know? So with confidence, you can know that this is the gold standard. This is the relevant. And the other thing too is that another reason why you want to pay attention to that is that as we're starting to see much more increase in data science in the CFA program, as it rightly should be, that you want to make sure that you do come through the program before they're going to continue making changes all the time, as Beng Hooi alluded to. So you don't want to be farting around, is what I'm saying. You want to get to the program, and if you do end up having to learn Python, which I recommend you do anyway, you can always kind of do that in your own time, right? Rather than be forced to and be examined on it. Which, if I could speculate, Beng Hooi, I think that's going to be coming down the pike pretty soon. I think students are going to be valuing stocks and companies and stuff. They're going to be using Python as part of that. Maybe the time series reading, finally, they can actually breathe some life into that and actually take a model, use variables, and try and predict things like probability of default and stuff. Very fantastic, very interesting. But again, not sure that's something that you'd want to be doing on an exam, with all the other challenges, long hours at the job, maybe a family, things like that. So don't fart around. Get her done. Play the long game. You'll be glad you did.
Great. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for spending your Saturday morning with us. And we hope to see you very soon.
Yeah.
Bye for now.
Yeah. Thanks for your time, folks. Take it easy. And my numbers are there. Call me if you need to. Anytime.